840, Big 550, KTRS. David Stokes is going to join us. He joins us every Monday, and he's a Show Me Institute policy analyst. More importantly, he's a friend of the show. So I know the Show Me Institute pays his salary, but he's a friend of the show. So David Stokes, welcome back, Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome back to you. I know you were back as of Tuesday last week, but
right.
I missed you.
You did,
last
yes.
week.
I did. I was jonesing for a little.
So, hello, McGraw. Hello, Aaron.
Hello. Nice to see you again, David.
And you have been, over the last recent weeks and months and years now, you've been ahead of the curve. You bring us things that are percolating under the surface, and then maybe because you shed light on them, they become big stories. But you did Ellisville, you did the high-rise building over here in Clayton. You've done all sorts of things. So what's percolating under the surface that we'll be arguing about next week, David Stokes?
Well, right now, no pressure there.
Take out your crystal ball.
Right now, the big issue in Olivet is the proposition on there to require a public vote anytime Olivet would consider any type of changes at all to their park system under the rubric of privatization.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about a few months ago with the proposal to turn Warson Park in. Some private company wanted to lease it and build hockey rinks and lacrosse fields
right.
and a medical building there, and the city would still own it, but they wanted to lease it.
Right.
And some opponents of that idea have now put a general proposition on the ballot in Olivet, which will be voted on here in a week and a day,
right,
to require a public vote before any such proposal like that goes forward. Now, two things. This is not a referendum on the Warson Park proposal.
Did that go through?
I don't believe that has gone through.
Okay.
But because that, and a lawyer would be better explaining this than I, because that started before this whole proposal has come up, that will go forward,
okay,
yay or nay, on the current rules.
Okay.
But the issue here is to put this ballot requiring a public vote before any type of privatization at all.
Right.
And my personal policy opinion is that this goes way too far. I don't have any issue with the public vote requiring before we sell parkland, but it also says before you lease, before you do all sorts of other things with parkland. And you go to the Save Our Parks website, which is the group supporting the ballot proposition, and I believe what they cite as their own examples are far too broad.
It's Save Our Parks or Keep Our Parks Underutilized.com.
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
also be the name of their website.
It sounds like a the idea to do. Yeah,
Or raise our parks raise our taxes in the future because we've underutilized our parks.com.
But this is a classic example of people trying to create a situation where they're locking future elected officials from doing anything.
Exactly, and it's I don't want to sit here and say the people should not be able to have their say in this, and then come back tomorrow and say, or come back next Monday, yes, let the people of Clayton vote on the tax subsidy for the building.
Right.
I mean, I want to be consistent here, and I see there's a role for elected officials to make decisions, and I think too often we take that out of their hands, and we elect people to make these choices.
Right.
If they do a bad job, we unelect them.
Right.
That said, I do agree that something is like selling parkland is a major decision, and I can see allowing the people of Olivet to say yes or no on that. But let's get into some of the examples that they have. Like, yes, if Olivet even proposed to lease parkland, it would require a public vote. And then they cite, this isn't just for we don't mean leasing to a athletic league, a kids youth league. We mean leasing to a big bad for-profit restaurant or bar or private company. This is not, except for big bad, that's their own language on their site.
I was gonna say,
These Ebola-ridden people who want to take our parks from us.
Yeah.
So this is a great opportunity to remind people in the listening audience, the crown jewel of the park system in our community is Forest Park. So let's remind people how many things in Forest Park are privately operated. It's owned by the city, but it's leased out to private companies, private individuals to operate it, all of which would be prevented now if this passes in Olivet, except if it goes to a vote of the people. And the average business person doesn't want to put the time and effort.
I was going to say, it's not even worth the trouble. So then, therefore, you're not going to have great events happening in the parks.
Right. Let's look at Forest Park. The boathouse, privately owned by the city, privately operated restaurant and bar, would be required to go to a public vote in Olivet if something like this passes. If somebody proposed a beer garden or a restaurant in a park in Olivet, there's nothing wrong with having a restaurant or beer garden in a park.
Right.
Steinberg Ice Rink, privately operated business. The city owns the rink, a private company runs it. The golf courses in Forest Park.
Norman K. Probstein Golf Course.
Absolutely.
The Jewel House, right?
And look, Forest Park Forever deserves a lot of the credit for these improvements in Forest Park over the
Jewel
last
House.
25 years. But the private businesses that lease and then try to make a profit and offer a great service in Forest Park deserve a lot of the credit too. And this Olivet proposal, by requiring anything like that at all that even smacks of a lease, goes too far.
You don't even have to look at the Norman K. Probstein Golf Course. What about Shakespeare in the Park? Right? I mean, would that have to go through a public vote if Shakespeare in the Park wanted to use the park as a private entity to go and put on a performance?
It's a great example. Look at all I just cited a few for-profit examples in Forest Park. Well, there's also the Muni,
I was
and the
just gonna
Shakespeare
say.
in the Park as non-profit associations that do amazing things in Forest Park. Privately, they do it all privately. Now, in Olivet, I think that's an open question. If it was to try and they've got their language on saying that nonprofit groups would generally be allowed to use park facilities. I'm sure if a nonprofit group, though, proposed something strange and unusual within the park, it might well have to go to a vote of the people. So, I'm just trying to read what they say at Save Our Park.
So this is an Olivet decision only. So only the people of Olivet get to vote on this.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of referendums. I'm just not, because I think it abdicates the elected officials from making important and hard choices. And it's not, I don't want to go and vote 85 times when I go and vote, right? I send you to go represent me. And if you don't like what I do, I'm going to get you out of there. And, we have elections so that I can, which is a referendum on you. Right? I don't need a referendum on, what happens on 1st Street and on 2nd Street and on 3rd Street and on 5th Street and on 9th Street, right? Just, I'm going to vote for you, and then you're supposed to do what I tell you to do.
Well, I think a great example where a referendum was used for some elected officials each to at least say, all right, let's take this out of our hands and give it to you, was the sales tax for roads in August.
Right.
I think there were a lot of representatives in Jefferson City, senators and reps, who said, I don't necessarily like it, but, it's a big issue. You all
take
decide.
it.
And I think there were people who supported it and people who were opposed to it. I know there were people who were opposed to it who still said, well, let's let the voters make their decision.
Right.
And I thought the voters made the right policy decision in August when they overwhelmingly shot that general sales tax down.
Right.
But there is something to be said for elected officials making the hard decisions.
Well, there's also something to be said for passing a referendum and then having the legislature overturn the will of the people, which Missouri is famous for.
Well, we've done that, and I'll sort of let me sort of defend that a little bit, in that there are two ways to do a statewide referendum in Missouri. There's the constitutional route, which is hard, and the statutory route, which is easy, much easier.
Right.
So you have these groups doing the statutory route, which is an easier way to get it on the ballot, knowing full well that the legislature can change it if they
want to. If they want to change the will of the people.
Go the constitutional route, which you wouldn't be able to do that.
Which you need more money and more money to get it on the ballot and more signatures and all
Correct.
that type of stuff. All right.
Correct.
David Stokes, when can we read you? When can we see you?
We have a lot of information up on privatization issues generally, and including some stuff on park privatization. Nobody is out there saying, hey, I got a great idea. Let's go sell all our green space. Okay? Nobody.
You never
nobody
know.
wants to. I'm not saying that. There's a role for private organizations to play in parks. Forest Park is a terrific example of, again, the boathouse, the golf course, the
Muni,
ice rink, and then nonprofit groups like the Muni.
Yeah.
Of how private companies, private not-for-profits play in parks. And I think this Olivet proposal, by severely limiting that and placing every business proposal, not only are you going to have to go through all your city council permitting and everything, and now you're going to have it put before a public vote. I think it's going to tie the hands of elected officials there, and I don't think it's a good idea.
Too much red
Ladies and
tape.
gentlemen, that's why he's the best. You'll be arguing about all of this next week. Now you are fully informed. Show Me Institute policy analyst David Stokes. Have a good week, David.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, David.
Talk a little Mizzou football next.